History books love to talk about geniuses, but let's be honest, the morons are way more entertaining. Here are 101 people who had power, money, and influence, and used them to make the absolute worst decisions in human history. You might actually feel smarter just by watching this. 1. Some mistakes are small, but Thomas Austin's mistake covered a whole continent. This wealthy idiot wanted to hunt like an English gentleman, so he released 24 rabbits into the Australian wild. He said they could do little harm. Fast forward a few years and billions of rabbits have devoured the country's ecosystem. Nice shooting, Tex. 2. Genghis Khan actually wanted peaceful trade with the Khwarezmian Empire. He sent diplomats to propose a deal. But the Sultan, in a stroke of genius, decided to behead the ambassadors and send their heads back. The Mongols responded by literally erasing his entire empire from the map. Never poke a bear, and definitely do not decapitate the bear's mailman. 3. Imagine being the guy who looked at the Beatles and said, nah. Dick Rowe at Decca Records refused to sign the band, famously claiming that guitar groups are on the way out. He signed a trembling disco band instead. He missed out on billions of dollars and secured his place as the patron saint of bad business takes. 4. During the American Civil War, General John Sedgwick was warned to take cover from enemy snipers. He stood tall and arrogantly scoffed, shouting that they could not hit an elephant at this distance. Spoiler alert. They could. He was shot in the face a second later. Arrogance is a hell of a drug, but it is not a bulletproof vest. 5. William Orton was the president of Western Union when Alexander Graham Bell offered him the patent for the telephone for just $100,000. Orton laughed and called the phone a toy with no commercial possibilities. He passed on the deal. That toy is now in every pocket on Earth, and Western Union just sends money orders. 6. You have to be a special kind of narcissist to hold a funeral for a body part. Mexican General Santa Anna lost his leg in battle, which is tragic, but then he ordered a full-state funeral for the severed limb. Cannon salutes, poetry, prayers. He forced a starving nation to mourn a rotting piece of meat. Talk about an ego trip. 7. King Priam of Troy saw a giant wooden horse left by his enemies. His advisors told him to burn it. His daughter screamed it was a trap. Priam ignored everyone, dragged the horse inside, and went to sleep. He literally pulled his own assassination through the front door. 8. Mao Zedong looked at sparrows eating grain and decided they were enemies of the state. He ordered a national campaign to kill every sparrow in China. It worked perfectly until the locusts arrived. Without birds to eat them, the bugs destroyed the crops, causing a famine that killed millions. Messing with nature requires more than just a dictator's ego. 9. Vice Admiral George Tryon was a brilliant naval commander who forgot how geometry works. He ordered 2 massive columns of battleships to turn inwards towards each other with insufficient space. His subordinates asked if he was sure. He insisted. The ships rammed into each other and his flagship sank in minutes. He went down with the ship and his reputation. 10. King Xerxes of Persia threw the ultimate temper tantrum. When a storm destroyed his bridge, he didn't just rebuild it. He ordered his soldiers to whip the ocean 300 times and threw shackles into the water to arrest the sea. Because screaming at salt water is clearly the sign of a stable and very genius mind. 11. Francisco Solano Lopez, the dictator of Paraguay, had a Napoleon complex but none of the skill. He decided to declare war on Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, all at the exact same time. It went as well as you expect. Paraguay lost 90% of its male population, and Lopez died claiming he conquered history. He didn't. 12. Math is hard, but Christopher Columbus was impressively bad at it. He calculated the Earth was pear-shaped and thousands of miles smaller than it actually is. He didn't discover America on purpose, he crashed into it. If that continent hadn't been there to catch him, he and his crew would have starved to death in the open ocean. 13. Robert Falcon. Scott wanted to be the first to the South Pole, but he brought ponies instead of dogs. Ponies sweat, and in Antarctica, sweat freezes instantly. While his rival Amundsen skied to victory with happy huskies, Scott was busy pushing frozen horses through the snow. He died just miles from safety because He bet on the wrong animal. 14. Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Pope Formosus, so much that he couldn't let it go. He dug up Formosus's rotting corpse, dressed it in robes, and put it on trial for perjury. He screamed at a skeleton for hours. The court found the dead guy guilty, but the public decided Stephen was totally insane and strangled him shortly after. 15. General George Custer was warned by his scouts that there were thousands of native warriors waiting for him at Little Bighorn. He ignored them, split his forces, and attacked anyway because he wanted all the glory. It takes a special kind of arrogance to charge into a trap that everyone else can clearly see. 16. In ancient Greece, Pythagoras was a genius at math, but an idiot at survival. He had a phobia of beans. When enemies chased him to the edge of a fava bean field, he refused to run through it to escape. He stood there and got killed rather than touch a legume. That is a heavy price to pay for being a picky eater. 17. King Louis XVI of France tried to escape the revolution in a carriage, but he made a pit stop for snacks and wine. He was recognized because his face was literally on the money everyone used. If he had just skipped lunch and kept moving, he might have kept his head attached to his body. 18. Hong Xiuquan failed the Chinese civil service exam multiple times and had a nervous breakdown. He woke up claiming to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He started the Taiping Rebellion, which led to 20 million deaths. Failing a test is tough, but maybe don't start a holy war just because you didn't study enough. 19. Marcus Licinius Crassus was the richest man in Rome, but he wanted military glory. He invaded Parthia without a plan and got trapped in the desert. Legend says his enemies poured molten gold down his throat to mock his greed. He bought an army but couldn't buy common sense. 20. J. Bruce Ismay, the owner of the Titanic, allegedly pressured the captain to maintain top speed in an ice field to beat a crossing record. When the ship hit the iceberg, he jumped into a lifeboat, leaving women and children behind. He survived the sinking but lived the rest of his life as the world's most hated coward. 21. Emperor Sutoku of Japan was exiled and became so angry that he bit off his own tongue. He used the blood to write curses against the emperor who banished him. It's definitely a dramatic power move, but generally you need your tongue to effectively complain about your living conditions. 22. King James II of Scotland was obsessed with modern artillery. He ordered a massive cannon to be fired to celebrate his wife's arrival. He stood way too close. The cannon exploded, and a shard of metal sliced his thigh in two, killing him instantly. He was literally killed by his own favorite toy. 23. King Charles II of Navarre earned the nickname Charles the Bad, but Charles the Flammable fits better. To cure an illness, his doctor wrapped him in brandy-soaked sheets. A servant brought a candle too close to cut a loose thread, and the king went up in flames. He literally cooked himself alive trying to get healthy. 24. Sometimes you conquer the world, and sometimes you forget to name a successor. Alexander the Great built a massive empire, but when asked on his deathbed who should rule, he vaguely mumbled, "To the strongest." His generals immediately started a civil war that tore the empire apart. A simple will could have saved everyone a lot of trouble. 25. Heinrich Schliemann was obsessed with finding the ancient city of Troy. He found it, but he used dynamite to blast through the unimportant upper layers of dirt to get to the bottom. It turns out he blasted right through the actual Troy he was looking for. He discovered history by blowing it to smithereens. 26. King Adolf Frederick of Sweden literally ate himself to death. He sat down for a royal meal of lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, kippers, and champagne, topped off with 14 servings of dessert. His digestive system finally gave up and exploded. It is definitely a way to go, but not a smart one. 27. Didius Julianus was a wealthy Roman who decided to buy the empire when the Praetorian Guard auctioned it off to the highest bidder. He won, but the people hated him, the money ran out, and the guards killed him 66 days later. He basically bought the world's most expensive death sentence. 28. Verify your sources, folks. Ponce de Leon spent his fortune and energy wandering through Florida swamps looking for the Fountain of Youth. He ended up getting shot by a poisoned arrow. He died from a wound he got while chasing a magic water fairy tale he heard from a rumor. 29. Sir Cloudesley Shovel was a British admiral who didn't like being corrected. When a sailor pointed out that their navigation was wrong and they were near dangerous rocks, Shovel had the man hanged for mutiny. Hours later, the fleet crashed into those exact rocks, killing Shovel and thousands of men. 30. Tsar Nicholas II was celebrating his coronation when a stampede for free pretzels killed over 1,000 people. Instead of canceling the party to mourn, he went to a gala and danced the night away. It made him look like a heartless monster and set the stage for the revolution that eventually executed his entire family. 31. Environmental destruction usually takes a global effort, but Thomas Migley Jr. did it solo. He invented leaded gasoline and CFCs, poisoning the atmosphere and 3 generations of children. Then, in a twist of poetic justice, he strangled himself to death with a pulley system he invented to help him get out of bed. 32. Gravity is a harsh mistress, but Franz Reichelt ignored her. He was so sure his homemade parachute suit worked that he jumped off the Eiffel Tower. He didn't glide, he fell like a stone and left a crater in the frozen ground. Next time, maybe test the invention with a sandbag first. 33. Russian Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky led the Voyage of the Damned. He was so paranoid that he attacked British fishing boats, thinking they were Japanese torpedo boats. He dragged his fleet halfway around the world, losing ships to friendly fire and incompetence, only to be instantly destroyed the moment he actually reached Japan. 34. One wrong turn literally started World War I. Leopold Loika, the driver for Archduke Franz Ferdinand, got lost in Sarajevo and stopped the car right in front of an assassin eating a sandwich. If Leopold had just checked a map, the 20th century might have been a lot less bloody. 35. General Ambrose Burnside had a massive army and a shallow creek to cross. Instead of just wading through the knee-deep water, he ordered thousands of men to charge across a narrow bridge explicitly covered by enemy snipers. It was a bottleneck of death caused entirely by a man who didn't want to get his boots wet. 36. Royalty often comes with madness, but King Charles VI of France took it to a new level. He refused to let anyone touch him because he was convinced he was made of glass and would shatter. He wore iron rods in his clothes to prevent breaking, paralyzing the French government with his fragility. 37. Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang was terrified of dying, so he took immortality pills prescribed by his doctors. The main ingredient was mercury. He slowly poisoned himself and died at 49, insane and rotting from the inside. He killed himself trying to live forever. 38. Trusting your enemy is bad, but trusting Arminius was fatal. Roman general Varus walked 3 legions into the Teutoburg forest because his friend said it was a shortcut. It was actually a massive trap. Varus lost his army, his head, and forced the emperor to bang his head against a wall screaming for his legions back. 39. Paranoia killed Mithridates of Pontus, but not in the way you think. He was so afraid of being poisoned that he took small doses of poison every day to build immunity. When he actually wanted to commit suicide to avoid capture, the poison wouldn't work. He had to ask his bodyguard to stab him instead. 40. Harry Warner, one of the famous Warner brothers, watched a film with sound and scoffed. He famously asked, "Who the hell wants to hear actors talk?" He resisted talkies for years. He almost bankrupted the studio because he thought silent movies were the peak of technology. 41. Superstition ruins armies, as Athenian general Nicias proved. He had a clear chance to escape a losing battle, but a lunar eclipse happened. He refused to move his army for 27 days to wait out the bad omen. The enemy used that time to trap him, and his entire army was slaughtered because he was afraid of the moon. 42. Caliph al-Mustasim of Baghdad believed his city was invincible. When the Mongols arrived, he refused to pay tribute or strengthen his walls. He taunted the most dangerous army on earth. The Mongols sacked the city and rolled the caliph in a carpet, where he was trampled to death by horses. 43. Pope Innocent VIII was dying and desperate for a cure. His doctor suggested a blood transfusion, which in 1492 meant drinking it. He drank the blood of 3 10-year-old boys. The boys died, and then the Pope died anyway. It was a vampire ritual that achieved absolutely nothing. 44. King Peter III of Russia was the Tsar, but he hated Russia and loved Prussia. During a war where Russia was crushing Prussia, he switched sides and gave all the conquered land back to his idol, Frederick the Great. His own wife, Catherine the Great, decided he was too stupid to rule and took his throne. 45. Stade Bonnet was a wealthy landowner who had a midlife crisis and decided to become a pirate. The problem? He had no idea how to sail. He bought a ship legally, paid his crew a salary, and walked around in a silk dressing gown reading books. He was basically the first cosplayer of the high seas. 46. Cyril Radcliffe had never been to India, but he was given 5 weeks to draw the border between India and Pakistan. He drew a line on a map over lunch that split villages, families, and water sources. His rushed homework assignment caused chaos, wars, and millions of displaced people that still continues today. 47. Emperor Nero is famous for fiddling, but his wrestling career was worse. He entered the Olympics and ordered everyone to let him win. He fell out of his chariot during a race and still claimed the gold medal. It is easy to be a champion when you can execute the referees. 48. Pope Benedict IX was the only man to be pope 3 separate times. Why? Because he kept selling the title. He literally sold the papacy to his godfather so he could get married, then changed his mind and came back with an army to take it back. He treated the Vatican like a pawn shop. 49. Italian General Luigi Cadorna fought the Battle of the Isonzo. Not once, but 12 times. He attacked the exact same heavily defended mountain spot over and over again, losing hundreds of thousands of men. He fired his subordinates for incompetence, never realizing the only incompetence was in his own mirror. 50. Captain William Bligh was such a toxic micromanager that his crew would rather die in an open boat than sail with him. The mutiny on the Bounty happened because he obsessed over lemons and polished cannonballs while insulting his officers. He was a great navigator but a failure at basic human resources. 51. Walter Hunt was a brilliant inventor who created the safety pin in just 3 hours. But he owed a guy $15. So he sold the patent rights for just $400 to pay the debt. He gave away a global industry worth millions just to settle a cheap bar tab. 52. Austrian General Mack surrendered 50,000 men to Napoleon without a single shot being fired. He deployed his army based on where he thought Napoleon should be, ignored all scout reports that said otherwise, and got surrounded at Ulm. He essentially gift-wrapped his entire army for the French. 53. Neville Chamberlain waved a piece of paper and declared, "Peace for our time," after meeting Hitler. He genuinely believed the dictator's promise not to invade any more countries. A year later, tanks were rolling across Europe. It was the ultimate example of hearing what you want to hear instead of seeing reality. 54. Akhenaten decided Egypt needed a rebrand. He banned all the old gods, moved the capital to the middle of the desert, and forced everyone to worship only the sun disk. The economy collapsed, the army weakened, and the moment he died, the Egyptians smashed his statues and pretended he never existed. 55. Philip II of Spain built the Invincible Armada to invade England. But he appointed a commander who had never fought at sea and famously got seasick. Then he ordered the fleet to sail into the North Atlantic storms. The weather destroyed more Spanish ships than the British Navy ever did. 56. Long speeches are usually just boring, but for William Henry Harrison, it was fatal. The U.S. president insisted on giving a 2-hour inaugural address in the freezing rain without a coat to look tough. He caught pneumonia and died 30 days later. He literally talked himself to death. 57. Vikings were tough, but Earl Sigurd the Mighty died in the most embarrassing way possible. He strapped the severed head of an enemy to his saddle as a trophy. As he rode, the dead man's tooth scratched his leg, causing an infection that killed him. He was killed by a guy he had already beheaded. 58. Speed isn't everything in surgery. Dr. Robert Liston wanted to amputate a leg so fast that he accidentally cut off his assistant's fingers too. The patient died of gangrene, the assistant died of infection, and a spectator died of shock. He is the only surgeon in history with a 300% mortality rate for one operation. 59. General Maurice Gamelin was in charge of defending France during World War II, but he didn't trust technology. He set up his headquarters in a castle with no telephones or radios, relying on runners like it was the Middle Ages. The Germans blitzed past him while he was basically waiting for the mailman. 60. Venetian General Francesco Morosini was besieging Athens and knew the Ottomans were storing gunpowder in the Parthenon. Any sane person would avoid shooting the ancient wonder. Morosini fired a mortar shell right into it, blowing the roof off the greatest building in history. He is the reason we can't have nice things. 61. Manners can be deadly. Astronomer Tycho Brahe was at a royal banquet and really needed to use the bathroom. But he felt it was rude to leave the table before the king. So he held it in until his bladder literally burst. He died of a urinary infection because he was too polite to pee. 62. Karma works in mysterious ways for Pope Gregory IX. He declared that cats were instruments of Satan, sparking a massive kitty massacre across Europe. With the predators gone, the rat population exploded, carrying the fleas that spread the Black Death. He rolled out the red carpet for the plague. 63. Losing your wallet is annoying, but King John of England lost the crown jewels. He tried to take a shortcut across a tidal estuary called the Wash and misjudged the tide. His entire baggage train, including the crown, gold, and swords, was sucked into the mud, never to be seen again. 64. Henry Ford was a genius with cars but an idiot with agriculture. He bought a massive chunk of the Amazon rainforest to build Fordlandia, a rubber plantation run by American rules. He forced Brazilian workers to eat hamburgers and square dance. The trees died, the workers rioted, and the jungle reclaimed everything. 65. Most people verify their lottery tickets, but General George McClellan ignored a winning ticket. A soldier found General Lee's secret battle plans wrapped around 3 cigars. McClellan had the enemy's entire playbook in his hands but still hesitated to attack. He snatched a stalemate from the jaws of victory. 66. Lord Cardigan led the charge of the Light Brigade because he was too arrogant to ask for directions. He received a vague order to attack the guns, assumed it meant the heavily defended ones at the end of the valley, and rode his cavalry straight into cannon fire. It was bravery mixed with sheer stupidity. 67. Parenting is hard, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a hypocrite. He wrote the famous book Émile about how to properly raise and educate children. Meanwhile, in real life, he took all 5 of his own newborn babies and dumped them at a grim orphanage where most of them likely died. Do as I say, not as I do. 68. Trying to prove a medical point, Dr. Stubbins Firth went to extreme lengths. To prove yellow fever wasn't contagious, he poured infected vomit into his open cuts and even drank a glass of it. He survived only because the samples were old, but he is forever known as the doctor who chugged vomit for science. 69. Emperor Napoleon III thought he was a military genius like his uncle. He declared war on Prussia without any allies or a real plan. He was captured at the Battle of Sedan almost immediately. He started a war just to surrender his entire army and lose his throne in record time. 70. Sometimes you should just pay the ransom. Emperor Ethelred the Unready paid the Vikings a massive bribe of silver to go away. Surprisingly, the pirates took the money and immediately came back for more. He basically taught the Vikings that he was a giant ATM machine. 71. King Charles VIII of France conquered Naples, but a doorframe conquered him. While rushing to watch a tennis match, he slammed his forehead into a low stone lintel. He fell into a coma and died hours later. He survived medieval battles only to be taken out by bad architecture. 72. Tsar Alexander II thought Alaska was a frozen wasteland that was hard to defend. He sold it to the United States for 2 cents an acre. He thought he ripped off the Americans. Then gold and oil were discovered. He gave away a resource-rich empire for pocket change. 73. Admiral Villeneuve knew his fleet wasn't ready to fight the British, but he was more afraid of Napoleon firing him. So he sailed out of Cadiz directly into Nelson's trap at Trafalgar. He lost the fleet and ensured Britain ruled the waves for a century, all because he didn't want a bad performance review. 74. Ottoman General Enver Pasha wanted glory in World War I, so he ordered an attack through the Caucasus Mountains in the middle of winter. He sent 90,000 men into a blizzard wearing summer uniforms. 25,000 froze to death before they even saw an enemy soldier. 75. King Pyrrhus of Epirus was a great tactician who didn't understand the big picture. He won battles against the Romans but lost so many of his own men doing it that he ruined his army. He invented the term Pyrrhic victory, which is a fancy way of saying winning so hard that you actually lose. 76. If you make a law, make sure you remember it. The ancient Greek lawmaker Charondas passed a law that anyone who brought a weapon into the assembly must die. One day, he came back from hunting and forgot to take off his dagger. To uphold his own law, he had to stab himself. 77. Balloonist Salomon. Andrei thought he could fly to the North Pole in a hydrogen balloon. The balloon was leaking before he even took off, but he was too embarrassed to cancel the media event. He crashed on the ice in 3 days and died after wandering the frozen wasteland. 78. King Alexander of Greece survived the brutality of World War I, but he couldn't survive a walk in his garden. He saw his dog fighting a monkey and tried to break it up. The monkey bit him, the wound got infected, and he died. He literally lost a throne and his life to a pet macaque. 79. Philip VI of France brought crossbowmen to the Battle of Crécy, but forgot their shields. When it started raining, their bowstrings got wet and useless. When they tried to retreat, Philip ordered his own knights to charge through them, slaughtering his own army in a chaotic mess. 80. Empress Dowager Cixi needed a modern navy to defend China. Instead, she embezzled the Navy's funds to build a magnificent marble boat that couldn't float in her summer palace. When the Japanese Navy attacked, China's ships were outdated and destroyed. At least she had a nice stone boat to look at. 81. Buying landmarks usually raises red flags, but not for André Poisson. A con man sold him the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal, claiming the city couldn't afford the maintenance. Poisson paid a massive bribe and signed the papers. He was too embarrassed to go to the police when he realized he bought a tower he couldn't move. 82. Roman Emperor Commodus thought he was a gladiator god. He charged the treasury a massive fee for every appearance, bankrupting Rome. He fought opponents who were given dull swords or were literally physically disabled. He was basically a bully who made the taxpayers pay for his own ego trip until his wrestler friend strangled him in the bath. 83. Faking your own death to test your popularity is a risky move. Eccentric millionaire Timothy Dexter held a mock funeral to see who would cry. When his wife didn't cry enough, he revealed he was alive and beat her with a cane in front of the guests. He proved he was alive, but also that he was a complete lunatic. 84. General Arthur Percival defended Singapore, an island fortress with massive guns. The problem was, he thought the Japanese would attack from the sea, so the guns pointed that way. The Japanese attacked from the land side, and Percival couldn't turn the guns around. He surrendered the impregnable fortress in days. 85. Compromise keeps you alive, but King Charles I of England preferred to be stubborn. He fought with Parliament, started a civil war, lost, and still refused to negotiate. He believed kings were chosen by God and couldn't be wrong. He held on to that belief right up until the axe chopped off his royal head. 86. Welcoming an invasion force is rarely a good strategy. Aztec Emperor Montezuma II believed Hernán Cortés might be a returning god. He invited the conquistador into his palace, gave him gold, and let him scout the city's defenses. By the time he realized Cortés was just a greedy human, his empire was already doomed. 87. Darius III of Persia commanded the largest army in the world, but he lacked a spine. In 2 separate battles against Alexander the Great, Darius got scared and ran away before the fight was even finished. His own generals got so tired of his cowardice that they stabbed him and left him in a cart. 88. Prince Felix Yusupov wanted to kill Rasputin, but he was terrible at it. He poisoned the monk's cakes, but the poison was old. He shot him, but didn't check the pulse. He beat him, but Rasputin kept getting up. It took a chaotic night of failures just to kill one unarmed mystic. 89. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created Sherlock Holmes, the most logical detective in history. But in real life, he was easily duped. He staked his reputation on photos of fairies taken by two schoolgirls. He wrote a whole book proving they were real. They were just paper cutouts held up by hatpins. 90. Pope Leo X was too busy partying to save the church. When Martin Luther started complaining about corruption, Leo dismissed it as a drunken quarrel. He went back to hosting lavish banquets and bankrupting the Vatican. By the time he paid attention, the Protestant Reformation had split Christianity in half forever. 91. Maps are useful, but General Oreste Baratieri didn't think so. He led the Italian army against Ethiopia with outdated maps and confused orders. He marched his men into a box canyon where the Ethiopian army was waiting on the high ground. He managed to lose a modern army to a force armed largely with spears and courage. 92. Fame is a drug, and Herostratus overdosed on it. He wanted to be immortal in history, so he burned down the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the world. He destroyed a masterpiece just to get his name in the papers. The Greeks tried to ban his name, but ironically, we are still talking about this idiot today. 93. William Kidd was a pirate hunter who decided to become a pirate, but he was bad at both. He attacked the wrong ships, angered the British East India Company, and then sailed to New York thinking he would be forgiven. He was arrested immediately. He was the only pirate who essentially turned himself in by accident. 94. Diplomatic genius. Alcibiades switched sides 3 times during the Peloponnesian War. He betrayed Athens for Sparta, betrayed Sparta for Persia, and then went back to Athens. Eventually, everyone realized he was loyal only to himself. His neighbors got tired of his double-crossing and set his house on fire while he was sleeping. 95. Ignoring the weather report destroyed the Spanish Armada, but it also killed Valens. The Roman emperor attacked the Goths on a scorching hot day without giving his soldiers water or food. His dehydrated, exhausted men were slaughtered. Valens died in the chaos because he didn't give his troops a lunch break. 96. Playing poor is a dangerous game for a queen. Marie Antoinette built a fake peasant village at Versailles so she could dress up as a milkmaid and pretend to be poor for fun. Meanwhile, real peasants were starving outside her gates. It was a level of tone deafness that rightfully infuriated the people who eventually guillotined her. 97. Roman Emperor Valerian thought he could negotiate with the Persians alone. He rode out to meet King Shapur-Amar and was immediately captured. He spent the rest of his life as a literal footstool for the Persian king to step on when mounting his horse. He went from ruler of the world to living furniture. 98. Traitors usually expect a reward, but Benedict Arnold miscalculated. He betrayed the American colonies because he felt unappreciated, but the British didn't trust him either. He died in London, broke and friendless, despised by the country he betrayed and disliked by the country he joined. 99. William Miller convinced thousands of people that the world would definitively end on October 22, 1844. His followers sold their homes and gave away their money. When the sun rose on October 23rd, Miller had to explain to a lot of homeless, angry people that he was just bad at math. 100. Attila the Hun was the scourge of God who terrified Rome, but he couldn't handle his liquor. On his wedding night, he drank so much wine that he passed out flat on his back. He got a nosebleed in his sleep and choked to death on his own blood. The greatest warrior of his age was defeated by a Pinot Noir. 101. Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II commands the award for the most embarrassing defeat in history. At the Battle of Karansebes, he led 100,000 men against the Turks. But they got drunk, panicked in the dark, and started shooting each other. Joseph lost 10,000 men and fell into a creek without seeing a single enemy soldier. He literally went to war with himself and lost. We just saw 101 candidates for the Hall of Shame. But there can be only one king of idiots. Who actually made you angry with their sheer stupidity and is the biggest idiot in history? Pick a winner and defend your choice in the comments. If you have more brain cells than these guys, like and subscribe.